A piercing scream shattered the stillness of the Wyoming morning as Hannah Davis watched helplessly while two men dragged her children from their small homestead just outside Cheyenne. The year was 1878, and in that moment, Hannah's world collapsed like a house of cards in a windstorm. "Mama, Mama," her 8-year-old son Samuel cried, reaching for her with desperate fingers as the taller man yanked him toward a waiting wagon. "Please, they're all I have." Hannah lunged forward, her honey-brown hair falling loose from its pins as she clawed at the arm of the second man who held her 6-year-old daughter Emma. The man shoved Hannah backward with such force that she tumbled to the ground, the taste of dust and blood filling her mouth as she bit her lip in the fall. "Court order, madam," the first man said without emotion, tipping his hat as if they were merely passing on the street rather than tearing apart her family. "Signed by Judge Patterson himself. These children are wards of the territory now." "On what grounds?" Hannah demanded, struggling to her feet, her calico dress now streaked with dirt. She had done nothing wrong, nothing but try to survive after her husband Thomas had passed from pneumonia the previous winter. "Unfit, mother, unable to provide. Complaint filed by your brother-in-law." The man's eyes didn't meet hers as he handed her a folded document that she was too distraught to read. "Henry?" Hannah's voice caught in her throat. "Henry Davis did this?" Her late husband's brother had been pressuring her to sell the homestead to him for months. When she refused, his visits had grown less frequent, his demeanor colder. But this was inconceivable. "Mama!" Emma's blonde curls bounced as she struggled against her captor's grip. Hannah lunged again, but a third man stepped between her and the wagon. "Madam, don't make this harder than it needs to be. You can petition the court, but for now, these children are going to the Territorial Children's Home in Laramie." The wagon lurched forward, her children's screams fading as the distance between them grew. Hannah collapsed to her knees in the dirt, the document clutched in her trembling hands, her voice raw from screaming long after the wagon disappeared from sight. She didn't know how long she knelt there, the Wyoming sun beating down mercilessly on her shoulders. It might have been minutes or hours before the sound of approaching hoofbeats roused her from her stupor of grief. A tall figure on horseback slowed to a stop beside her. Hannah didn't look up, didn't care who had come. Nothing mattered now that her children were gone. "Madam?" a deep voice tinged with concern. "Are you hurt?" Hannah finally raised her eyes, squinting against the sun to see a man silhouetted against the bright sky. His face was shadowed beneath the brim of a well-worn hat. "They took my children," she whispered, her voice cracking. She held up the crumpled paper. "They just took them." The rider dismounted in one fluid motion, boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. He crouched beside her, and now she could see his face weathered by sun and wind, with eyes the color of the Wyoming sky, and a jawline shadowed with several days' growth of beard. "Let me see that," he said gently, taking the paper from her trembling hands. As he read, his expression darkened. "Judge Patterson," he muttered. "That old buzzard." He handed the paper back to Hannah. "I'm Wade Quinn," he said. "I was riding through on my way north when I heard the commotion." "Hannah Davis," she replied automatically, the social graces her mother had instilled in her surfacing even through her despair. "This was my home." Wade Quinn glanced at the modest cabin behind her. "May I help you inside, Mrs. Davis? You've had a shock, and the sun out here is fierce." Hannah nodded numbly, allowing the stranger to help her to her feet. His hand on her elbow was steady as he guided her up the 3 wooden steps to her porch. Inside, the cabin was neat but sparse, a main room with a kitchen area, a table with 4 chairs, a small sitting area near the fireplace, and 2 doors that led to bedrooms. Children's toys were scattered across the floor where Samuel and Emma had been playing before the men arrived. Wade Quinn filled a tin cup with water from the bucket by the stove and handed it to Hannah. She took it gratefully, only now realizing how parched her throat was from screaming. "Tell me what happened," he said, settling into the chair across from her at the table. Hannah's words spilled out in a torrent: her husband's death, her struggle to maintain the homestead alone with 2 young children, her brother-in-law, Henry's increasingly insistent offers to buy the property, and finally, this morning's horrifying events. "Henry wants this land," she concluded, her initial shock giving way to a simmering anger. "He's tried everything else, and now he's trying to break me by taking my children." Wade's expression grew thoughtful. "I've seen this before," he said slowly. "Back in Colorado, man wanted his neighbor's mining claim, couldn't get it legally, so he found other ways to apply pressure." He leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "Judge Patterson has a reputation for being persuadable." "Are you saying Henry bribed the judge?" Hannah's eyes widened. Wade shrugged. "I'm saying it wouldn't surprise me, but proving it is another matter entirely." Hannah clutched the cup so tightly her knuckles whitened. "I have to get them back. They're all I have left of Thomas." Wade studied her for a long moment. "Do you have anyone who can help you? Family? Friends?" Hannah shook her head. "My parents died years ago. Thomas was my only family, and now—" She gestured helplessly. "The neighbors are kind, but they have their own struggles. And in town," she trailed off. In truth, since Thomas's death, she had become something of a recluse, venturing into Cheyenne only when absolutely necessary for supplies. Wade Quinn stood up and moved to the window, gazing out at the rolling Wyoming landscape. "I was heading up to Montana," he said, more to himself than to Hannah. "Cattle drive starting next week." Hannah said nothing, understanding that this stranger had his own life, his own obligations. Why should he concern himself with her problems? He turned back to her, decision evident in his clear blue eyes. "Mrs. Davis, I can't ride away and leave you like this, not in good conscience." Hope flickered in Hannah's chest for the first time since her children had been taken. "What can we do?" "First, we need to understand exactly what we're facing legally. That means a trip to town to speak with a lawyer, if there is one in Cheyenne." Hannah nodded. "Mr. Caldwell. He helped Thomas with the deed to this property when we homesteaded." "Good. And we'll need to gather evidence of your ability to provide for your children's statements from neighbors, proof of your resources." Wade's expression hardened. "And we need to understand exactly what your brother-in-law is up to." Hannah felt a surge of gratitude toward this stranger who had appeared like an answer to an unspoken prayer. "Why would you help me, Mr. Quinn? You don't know me." Wade's gaze dropped to the floor, where Emma's rag doll lay abandoned. "Let's just say I know what it's like to lose family," he said quietly. "And I've seen enough injustice in this territory to last a lifetime." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "Besides, I'm between jobs at the moment. That cattle drive can wait." For the first time since the wagon had disappeared with her children, Hannah felt a spark of hope. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't have much money, but whatever I have." Wade held up a hand. "Let's not worry about that now. First things first, get those children back." He glanced out the window at the setting sun. "It's too late to ride to town today. We'll go first thing tomorrow." That night, Hannah insisted Wade take Thomas's bed in the small second bedroom while she remained in the room she had shared with her children since her husband's death. Sleep eluded her as she clutched Emma's nightgown, breathing in the faint scent of her daughter that still clung to the fabric. She wondered where her children were sleeping tonight, whether they were afraid, whether they were together or had been separated. Dawn found her red-eyed, but resolute. She emerged from her bedroom to find Wade already up, coffee brewing on the stove. "Hope you don't mind," he said, gesturing to the pot. "Seemed like we could both use a strong cup this morning." Hannah managed a small smile. "Thank you." She accepted the tin mug he offered, the hot, bitter liquid reviving her senses. "I'll just change, and then we can go." She retreated to her bedroom and exchanged her nightgown for her best dress, a navy blue cotton with white piping that Thomas had always said brought out the blue in her eyes. She pinned her hair carefully, determined to present herself as a respectable, capable mother when they reached town. Wade had saddled his horse and was waiting on the porch when she emerged. "I thought we'd ride double," he said, quicker than hitching up a wagon. Hannah hesitated only briefly before nodding. She had ridden astride in her younger days, before propriety dictated side saddles for ladies. Wade helped her up behind him, and she gingerly placed her hands on his waist as the horse set off toward Cheyenne. The town was already bustling when they arrived, the main street lined with businesses, a general store, a saloon, a blacksmith, the telegraph office, and at the far end, the courthouse. Wade dismounted first, then reached up to help Hannah down, his strong hands spanning her waist momentarily before releasing her. "Mr. Caldwell's office?" he asked, glancing around the street. Hannah pointed to a modest building with a painted sign reading, "Jeremiah Caldwell, Attorney at Law." As they approached, she became acutely aware of the curious glances from townsfolk. A woman riding into town with an unfamiliar man would certainly set tongues wagging, especially a widow like herself. The lawyer's office was cool and dim after the brightness of the morning sun. Jeremiah Caldwell was a slight man with spectacles and thinning gray hair, but his handshake was firm as he greeted Hannah. "Mrs. Davis, it's been some time. My condolences again on Thomas's passing." His gaze shifted to Wade. "And you are?" "Wade Quinn," he replied simply. "A friend helping Mrs. Davis with a legal matter." Caldwell gestured for them to sit in the two chairs facing his desk. "What seems to be the trouble?" Hannah handed him the crumpled court order. As he read it, his bushy eyebrows drew together in a frown. "This is most irregular," he muttered. "Judge Patterson declaring you unfit without so much as a hearing?" He looked up at Hannah. "Who filed the complaint?" "My brother-in-law, Henry Davis," Hannah replied, her hands twisted in her lap. "He's been trying to get my land since Thomas died." Caldwell's frown deepened. "And now he's using the children as leverage." He removed his spectacles and polished them thoughtfully with a handkerchief. "I must say, this bears the hallmark of Henry's methods. He's become quite influential in certain circles since he acquired those mining interests last year." "Can we fight this?" Wade asked, leaning forward in his chair. Caldwell replaced his spectacles. "It won't be easy. Judge Patterson rarely reverses his decisions. But," he added, seeing Hannah's expression fall, "it's not impossible. We'll need to petition for a formal hearing, gather evidence of your fitness as a mother, and challenge the basis of the original complaint." "How long will that take?" Hannah's voice trembled slightly. "My children are in a strange place, probably terrified." "I'll file the petition today," Caldwell promised, "but these things move at the pace of territorial justice, which is to say, slowly. We might be looking at weeks, possibly months." "Months?" Hannah's heart sank. "They can't stay in that place for months." Wade's hand covered hers briefly, a gesture of reassurance that surprised her with its warmth. "What if we could prove that Henry Davis is attempting to defraud Mrs. Davis of her property?" he asked Caldwell. "That his complaint was filed with malicious intent?" The lawyer's eyes narrowed. "That would certainly strengthen our case, but you'd need substantial evidence." "Then that's what we'll get," Wade said with quiet determination. They left Caldwell's office with a plan in place. The lawyer would file the petition for a hearing immediately, while Hannah and Wade would gather statements from neighbors attesting to her character and her children's well-being under her care. Meanwhile, they would try to uncover evidence of Henry's true motives. As they stepped back onto the boardwalk, Hannah felt the weight of the task ahead. "This feels impossible," she admitted quietly. Wade's expression was resolute. "Nothing worth fighting for is ever easy, Mrs. Davis." "Hannah," she corrected him. "If you're going to help me through this, I think you should call me Hannah." A slight smile softened his weathered face. "Hannah it is, then." They spent the remainder of the day visiting neighbors within riding distance of Hannah's homestead. The Peterson family, who lived 2 miles to the east, readily provided a written statement praising Hannah's devotion to her children. Elderly Mrs. Whitaker, who sometimes watched Samuel and Emma when Hannah needed to go to town, was outraged by the situation and penned a forceful letter questioning the judgment of anyone who would separate such well-cared-for children from their loving mother. By the time they returned to Hannah's cabin, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the yard. Hannah dismounted with Wade's assistance, her legs stiff from the unaccustomed hours in the saddle. "We made a good start today," Wade said as he unsaddled his horse. "Tomorrow we should try to learn more about what Henry is planning for your land." Hannah nodded, exhaustion and worry etched in the lines of her face. "He's been talking about expanding his mining operations. He thinks there might be copper deposits on my property." Wade led his horse to the small corral beside the barn. That would explain his determination. Copper prices are high right now. Inside the cabin, Hannah busied herself preparing a simple meal of beans, bacon, and cornbread. The domestic task was a welcome distraction from her thoughts of Samuel and Emma, alone and frightened in the children's home. As they ate at the kitchen table, Wade seemed lost in thought. Finally he spoke. "I think I should pay Henry Davis a visit tomorrow." Hannah nearly choked on her cornbread. "That would be dangerous. Henry has a violent temper. He and Thomas came to blows more than once before we moved out here to Homestead." "Sometimes a direct approach yields results," Wade said. "I won't confront him outright. Just feel him out, see what I can learn." Hannah studied him across the table. In the lamplight, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the small scar near his right temple partially hidden by his sandy hair. He was a man who had lived a hard life, yet there was a gentleness in his manner that belied his rugged appearance. "Why are you really helping me, Mr. Quinn?" she asked softly. Wade's eyes met hers, and for a moment she glimpsed a profound sadness in their depths. "Wade," he corrected her. "And like I said, I've seen too much injustice." "There's more to it than that," Hannah pressed gently. He was silent for so long that she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, setting down his fork, he spoke in a voice so low she had to lean forward to hear him. "I had a sister," he said, "younger than me by 10 years. When our parents died, I was barely 18. The authorities decided I wasn't fit to raise her." His jaw tightened. "They put her in an orphanage. By the time I had established myself enough to petition for custody, she had been adopted by a family heading to California." He looked up at Hannah, his eyes haunted. "I never saw her again." Hannah's heart ached for the boy he had been, losing his sister that way. "I'm so sorry." Wade shook his head. "It was a long time ago, but when I saw you yesterday, kneeling in the dirt after they took your children, it brought it all back." He pushed away from the table. "I couldn't help my sister then, but maybe I can help you now." The following morning, Wade rode into Cheyenne alone, leaving Hannah to continue gathering statements from more distant neighbors. His destination was the Davis Mining Company office on the north side of town. The building was impressive 2 stories of brick with large windows and a freshly painted sign. Inside, a young clerk looked up from his ledger as Wade entered. "Can I help you, sir?" the clerk asked. "I'm hoping to speak with Mr. Henry Davis," Wade said, removing his hat, "regarding some potential business." The clerk's eyebrows rose slightly. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I believe he'll want to hear what I have to say. It concerns the expansion of his copper operations." The mention of copper seemed to do the trick. The clerk disappeared through a door behind his desk and returned moments later. "Mr. Davis will see you. This way, please." Henry Davis's office reflected his success. Leather-bound books lined the walls, a large desk dominated the space, and a crystal decanter of amber liquid sat on a silver tray. Henry himself was a bear of a man with thick black hair, streaked with gray, and a well-groomed beard. Unlike his late brother Thomas, who had been lean and of medium height according to the photograph Hannah had shown Wade, Henry was tall and imposing. "I understand you have information about copper," Henry said without preamble, not bothering to rise from behind his desk. "Who are you?" "Wade Quinn." He extended his hand, which Henry shook perfunctorily. "I've been surveying in the territory." Henry gestured for Wade to take a seat. "And what have you found that might interest me?" Wade settled into the leather chair, studying Henry's face. "I've been looking at a property west of town, homestead owned by a widow named Davis. Understand you might have some interest in it." Henry's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed slightly. "What's your connection to my sister-in-law?" "No connection," Wade lied smoothly. "Just heard talk around town that you've been trying to acquire that land. Thought you might like to know what I found." Henry leaned back in his chair, his demeanor wary but interested. "And what did you find, Mr. Quinn?" "Signs of copper, sure enough, but not where you think." Wade leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "The east side of the property, near the creek. I'd stake my reputation on it." Henry's expression shifted subtly, a flash of calculation in his eyes. "Interesting. The reports I commissioned suggested the deposits would be on the western ridge." "Those reports would be wrong," Wade said with confidence. "I've been finding copper deposits from Colorado to Montana for 15 years. I know what I'm looking at." Henry drummed his fingers on the desk, studying Wade. "And why come to me with this information? What's in it for you?" Wade shrugged. "I'm a practical man, Mr. Davis. I know you've been trying to get that land. Thought maybe there might be a finder's fee in it for me if I helped you focus your efforts in the right direction." A slow smile spread across Henry's face. "A businessman after my own heart." He reached for the decanter. "Drink?" Wade accepted the offered glass, though he merely pretended to sip the whiskey. "I hear the widow's been giving you trouble." Henry's smile faded. "She's stubborn. Doesn't understand business. That land's been wasted on crops when there's a fortune beneath the soil." He took a large swallow of his drink. "But I've taken steps to resolve the situation." "Oh?" Wade kept his tone casual, though his heart began to beat faster. Henry's smile returned, tinged with malice. "Let's just say she'll be more amenable to selling once she realizes her position is untenable." He leaned forward. "Between you and me, Mr. Quinn, a woman alone can't hold on to a piece of property like that, not in this territory. Sooner or later, she'll see reason." "And if she doesn't?" Wade prompted. Henry's eyes hardened. "Then she'll find that life can become very difficult indeed. Very difficult." He drained his glass. "But enough about my personal affairs. This information about the eastern section of the property, are you certain?" Wade nodded. "Would stake my life on it." "I might just hold you to that." Henry rose, indicating the meeting was over. "Leave your details with my clerk. If your information proves valuable, you'll be compensated accordingly." Wade stood, sensing he had pushed as far as he dared for one visit. "Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Davis." As he left the mining office, Wade's mind raced. He had confirmed Hannah's suspicions about Henry's interest in the copper deposits, but more importantly, he had glimpsed the man's true nature, calculating, ruthless, and determined to get what he wanted regardless of who suffered in the process. Back at Hannah's homestead, he found her hanging laundry in the yard, her honey-brown hair partially escaped from its pins and blowing in the light breeze. For a moment, he simply watched her, the graceful movement of her arms as she pinned a sheet to the line, the determined set of her shoulders despite the worry he knew weighed heavily on her mind. Something stirred in his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a very long time. She turned as he approached, her eyes questioning. "How did it go?" Wade dismounted. "Your brother-in-law is definitely after the copper," he confirmed. "And he's not a man who's used to being denied what he wants." Hannah's hands clenched around the damp sheet she was holding. "Did he mention Samuel and Emma?" "Not directly," Wade admitted, "but he made it clear he's using whatever leverage he can to force you to sell." Hannah's eyes filled with tears that she stubbornly refused to let fall. "Those are my children, not pawns in his business dealings." Wade stepped closer, gently taking the sheet from her hands and hanging it on the line. "We'll get them back, Hannah. I promise you that." She looked up at him, vulnerability and determination warring in her expression. "How can you be so sure?" "Because men like Henry Davis may have money and influence, but they underestimate people like you and me." He held her gaze steadily. "And that's a mistake he's going to regret." Over the next week, Hannah and Wade fell into a rhythm of working together to build their case. Mornings were spent tending to the essential tasks of maintaining the homestead, feeding the livestock, tending the vegetable garden that provided much of Hannah's food, and repairing the small windmill that pumped water from the well. Afternoons were devoted to gathering more evidence and statements, visiting Caldwell in town to check on the progress of the petition, and developing their strategy for the eventual hearing. During this time, Wade learned more about Hannah, how she had met Thomas while he was working as a clerk in her father's general store in Ohio, how they had decided to seek their fortune in the West after her parents died, how she had taught herself to garden and preserve food, to mend harnesses and milk cows, all skills that had been foreign to the shopkeeper's daughter she had once been. In turn, Hannah discovered bits and pieces of Wade's past, that he had grown up in Missouri, that he had fought briefly for the Union in the final year of the war when he was barely 17, that he had worked as a cowhand, a scout, and occasionally a bounty hunter in the years since. He spoke little of his family beyond the sister he had lost, and Hannah sensed there were wounds there still too painful to discuss. On the 8th day after her children had been taken, Hannah received permission from the territorial authorities to visit Samuel and Emma at the children's home in Laramie. Wade insisted on accompanying her on the day-long journey. The children's home was a stark, 3-story building on the outskirts of Laramie, surrounded by a high wooden fence. Inside, the matron, a severe woman named Mrs. Graves, led them to a sparse visiting room with a table and 4 chairs. 10 minutes, she said curtly. Those are the rules for parents under investigation. Hannah bit back a retort, knowing that antagonizing the woman would not help her cause. When the door opened again and Samuel and Emma entered, she had to restrain herself from rushing to them. "Mama!" Emma cried, breaking away from the attendant who had brought them and flinging herself into Hannah's arms. Samuel followed more slowly, his young face already showing the effects of their separation. There were shadows under his eyes, and his normally cheerful expression was guarded. Hannah gathered both children close, breathing in their familiar scents now overlaid with the harsh soap of the institution. "My darlings," she whispered, "are you all right? Are they treating you well?" Emma buried her face against Hannah's neck, while Samuel pulled back slightly. "They won't let us stay together," he said, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. "Emma's with the little girls, and I'm with the boys. We only see each other at meals." Hannah's heart clenched at the thought of her children separated even from each other. She looked up at Wade, who stood a respectful distance away, watching the reunion with an unreadable expression. "Samuel, Emma," Hannah said gently, "this is Mr. Quinn. He's helping me fight to bring you home." Wade crouched down to their level, his voice softer than Hannah had ever heard it. "Your mom misses you something fierce," he told them. "We're doing everything we can to get you back where you belong." Emma regarded him solemnly with eyes identical to Hannah's. "Promise?" "I promise," Wade said, and Hannah heard the conviction in his voice. The 10 minutes passed far too quickly. When Mrs. Graves returned to end the visit, Emma clung to Hannah, sobbing. It took both Hannah and Wade to gently disengage the child's arms. "I'll come back as soon as they let me," Hannah promised, her own tears falling freely now. "Be brave for me, my darlings, and remember that I love you more than anything in this world." The journey back to Cheyenne was mostly silent, Hannah lost in her thoughts and grief, Wade respecting her need for quiet. As night fell, he suggested they make camp rather than continuing in the darkness. Hannah looked up at the sky, already sprinkled with early stars. "I can't bear to think of them there another night," she whispered. Wade unloaded the bedrolls from their horses. "The hearing is in 2 weeks," he reminded her gently. "Caldwell thinks we have a strong case with all the character statements we've gathered." Hannah nodded mechanically, though her heart was heavy with doubt. She had seen the children's home now, had felt its coldness, had witnessed how it was already affecting Samuel's spirit. 2 more weeks seemed an eternity. Wade built a small fire and prepared a simple meal of jerky and hardtack. As they sat beside the crackling flames, the vast Wyoming night surrounding them, Hannah finally spoke. "Thank you for coming with me today," she said. I don't think I could have faced that alone. Wade poked at the fire with a stick. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Hannah Davis. She shook her head. I don't feel strong. I feel broken. Wade was quiet for a moment. Broken things can be mended, he said finally. Often they're stronger at the mended places than they were before. Hannah looked at him across the fire, seeing not just the hardness that life had carved into him, but also the compassion that still lived beneath it. Is that what happened to you, after your sister? The firelight flickered across his face, illuminating and shadowing it by turns. I wasn't as fortunate as you, he said quietly. I didn't have anyone to help me fight. I was just a kid myself, with no resources, no knowledge of how to navigate the legal system. So you've been alone all this time? Hannah asked softly. Wade's eyes met hers. I've had companions, as partners, but alone? In the ways that matter? Yes. Something passed between them then, a recognition of shared pain, of understanding that went beyond words. Hannah looked away first, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the moment. We should get some sleep, she said. It's a long ride back tomorrow. Wade nodded, banking the fire for the night. I'll take first watch. Hannah smiled faintly. This isn't Indian territory, Wade. We don't need watches. A corner of his mouth lifted in a half smile. Old habits. As Hannah settled into her bedroll, she found herself studying Wade's profile as he sat with his back against a rock, his rifle across his knees, gazing out into the darkness. What kind of life had he led? Always on guard, always moving from place to place. And why had he so readily put his own plans aside to help a woman he didn't know? The answer came to her as she drifted toward sleep. Perhaps in helping her fight for her children, Wade was finally fighting the battle he had been unable to win for his sister all those years ago. The next morning, they were back on the trail before dawn, pushing their horses to reach Cheyenne by nightfall. As they rode side by side through the rolling landscape, Hannah found herself drawing strength from Wade's steady presence beside her. In the short time since he had appeared in her life, he had become her anchor in the storm that threatened to overwhelm her. When they crested the final rise and saw Hannah's homestead in the distance, she felt a wave of determination wash over her. This was her land, her home, the legacy she and Thomas had built for their children. She would not let Henry Davis take it or her children away from her. We should see what Henry's been up to while we've been gone, Wade suggested as they approached the cabin. Hannah nodded, too weary from the journey to question his reasoning. They had barely dismounted when a rider approached from the direction of town. Mrs. Davis, the man called as he drew nearer. Hannah recognized him as one of the clerks from the telegraph office in Cheyenne. Yes? The man handed her a folded piece of paper. Urgent message for you, madam. Came in yesterday. Hannah fumbled with the paper, her heart racing. Had something happened to the children? As she read the brief message, her legs nearly gave way beneath her. Wade was at her side instantly, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. What is it? Hannah handed him the telegram, her hand shaking. It's from Caldwell. The hearing has been moved up. It's in 3 days. Wade's expression darkened as he read the message. Patterson's trying to catch us unprepared. He's in Henry's pocket, just like you suspected. Hannah's mind raced. We're not ready. The petition for character witnesses to appear, some of them won't be able to make it to town on such short notice. Then we'll have to make do with what we have, Wade said grimly, and find another angle. That night, after a hasty meal, they sat at Hannah's kitchen table, surrounded by all the documents and statements they had gathered. The lamplight cast long shadows as they reviewed their strategy for the hearing. We need something more, Wade said, rubbing his eyes after hours of reading. Something that proves Henry's motives beyond doubt. Hannah sighed, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Short of him confessing to bribing the judge, I don't see what would be enough. Wade's expression suddenly changed, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. What if we could get him to implicate himself? How? He's too clever for that. Wade leaned forward. Maybe not if he thinks he's about to get exactly what he wants. He outlined his plan, a risky strategy that hinged on Henry's greed and Wade's ability to convince the man to reveal his true intentions. Hannah listened with growing apprehension. "It's dangerous," she said when he had finished. "If Henry suspects you're trying to trap him—" "He won't," Wade assured her. "Men like him are blinded by their own sense of superiority. He already sees me as nothing more than an opportunistic drifter." Hannah reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. "I can't ask you to risk yourself like this." Wade turned his hand beneath hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. "You're not asking. I'm offering." His blue eyes held hers steadily. "Hannah, I've drifted through most of my life without purpose. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." The intensity of his gaze made her heart beat faster. In that moment, Hannah realized that somewhere along the way, this man had become more to her than just an ally in her fight. The realization both frightened and exhilarated her. "All right," she said softly. "We'll try it your way." The following day, Wade rode into Cheyenne alone, dressed in his best clothes, which weren't very fine at all, but clean and presentable enough for what he had in mind. His first stop was the telegraph office, where he sent a message that he hoped would provide additional insurance for their plan. His second stop was the saloon, where he made sure to be seen and heard inquiring about Henry Davis's whereabouts. By mid-afternoon, just as Wade had anticipated, one of Henry's men found him. "Mr. Davis would like a word with you," the man said, his tone making it clear this was not a request. Wade followed him to the Davis Mining Company office, where Henry was waiting behind his large desk, a satisfied smile on his face. "Mr. Quinn," Henry greeted him. "I understand you've been looking for me." Wade removed his hat. News travels fast in a small town. Henry gestured for Wade to sit. "I've had my geologists examine the eastern section of my sister-in-law's property, as you suggested." His smile broadened. "Their findings were most promising." "I thought they might be," Wade said, settling into the chair with an air of casual confidence. "Have you secured the land yet?" Henry's smile faltered slightly. "That matter is progressing. The hearing regarding my niece and nephew has been moved forward. Once Hannah realizes she has no hope of regaining custody, she'll be more amenable to selling." Wade leaned forward, lowering his voice. "What if I told you there might be a quicker way to get what you want?" Henry's eyebrows rose. "I'm listening." "The widow's in financial trouble," Wade lied smoothly. "The cost of fighting this legal battle is draining what little resources she had. She mentioned to me just yesterday that she might consider selling if the price was right." Henry studied Wade suspiciously. "And how exactly do you know what my sister-in-law is thinking? I was under the impression you had no connection to her." Wade shrugged. "I've been doing odd jobs around her place to earn my keep while I've been in the area. She talks, I listen." "I see." Henry drummed his fingers on the desk. "And what would your role be in this transaction?" "Just a facilitator," Wade said innocently. "For a modest percentage, of course." Henry laughed. "You are an enterprising man, Mr. Quinn. Very well. Tell Hannah I'll offer her a fair price for the land, and I might be persuaded to drop my objections to her regaining custody of the children." Wade kept his expression neutral, though his pulse quickened at Henry's implicit admission. "So you do have influence over the custody decision?" Henry waved a dismissive hand. "Let's just say Judge Patterson understands the importance of progress and development in this territory." He opened a drawer and withdrew a document. "I already have the sale agreement drawn up. Get her to sign this and I'll make sure the judge rules in her favor at the hearing." Wade took the document, scanning it quickly. "This offer seems low, considering the copper deposits." "The deposits are unproven," Henry countered, "and the land itself is marginal at best for agriculture. It's a generous offer under the circumstances." Wade folded the document and tucked it into his jacket. "I'll present it to her, but I think she might need more assurance about the children." Henry's eyes narrowed. What kind of assurance? Something in writing, perhaps, acknowledging that you'll withdraw your complaint about her fitness as a mother in exchange for the land. For a moment, Henry hesitated, and Wade feared he had pushed too far. Then, Henry pulled a sheet of paper from his desk and began to write. "Will this suffice?" he asked, pushing the note across to Wade. Wade read it quickly. The note stated that in exchange for the sale of the property, Henry Davis would withdraw all objections to Hannah's custody of her children and acknowledge that his previous complaints had been, and here was the damning phrase, strategically motivated to facilitate the acquisition of valuable mineral rights. It was more than Wade had hoped for a clear admission of Henry's true motives. "This should do nicely," he said, carefully folding the note and placing it with the sale agreement. "I'll bring you her answer tomorrow." As Wade left the mining office, he felt a mixture of triumph and wariness. The note was the evidence they needed, but Henry was not a man to be underestimated. If he realized he had been tricked, there would be consequences. Back at Hannah's homestead, Wade found her pacing the porch anxiously. "Did it work?" she asked as soon as he dismounted. Wade handed her the note Henry had written. As she read it, her eyes widened. "This is it," she breathed. "This proves he was using the children to get the land." "We need to get this to Caldwell immediately," Wade said. "And I sent a telegram this morning that might help us even more." Hannah looked up questioningly. "To the territorial governor," Wade explained. "Anonymous information about possible corruption involving Judge Patterson. I suggested he might want to send an observer to tomorrow's hearing." Hannah's face lit with hope for the first time since her children had been taken. "Do you think it will work?" Wade took her hands in his. "I think Henry Davis and Judge Patterson are about to discover that they've underestimated the wrong woman and the wrong drifter." The morning of the hearing dawned clear and cool. Hannah wore her best dress, the blue one that brought out her eyes, and had carefully arranged her honey-brown hair. Wade, who had spent the night in town to avoid any appearance of impropriety that might be used against Hannah, met her at the courthouse steps. "Nervous?" he asked softly as they paused at the entrance. Hannah nodded, clutching her reticule, which contained Henry's damning note. "What if it's not enough?" Wade placed his hand gently at the small of her back. "Then we'll find another way. I'm not giving up, and neither are you." Inside, the courtroom was already crowded. Hannah saw several of her neighbors who had provided character statements, Jeremiah Caldwell arranging papers at a small table, and Henry sitting confidently near the front with a well-dressed man Hannah assumed was his lawyer. What caught her attention, however, was a distinguished-looking gentleman seated beside the judge's empty chair, a man she didn't recognize but who carried himself with undeniable authority. "The governor's observer," Wade whispered, following her gaze. A hush fell over the room as Judge Patterson entered, his black robe swirling around him as he took his seat. His eyes narrowed slightly at the sight of the observer, but he gave no other indication of concern. "Custody hearing in the matter of Samuel and Emma Davis," he announced, his voice carrying through the room. "I understand there is a petition challenging my earlier ruling." Caldwell rose. "Yes, Your Honor. We are presenting evidence that Mrs. Hannah Davis is a fit and proper mother, and that the complaint against her was filed with malicious intent." Judge Patterson's bushy eyebrows rose. "A serious allegation, Mr. Caldwell. I assume you have substantial proof." "We do, Your Honor." The hearing proceeded with methodical formality. Hannah's neighbors testified to her character and her devotion to her children. The local schoolteacher spoke of Samuel and Emma's good behavior and Hannah's involvement in their education. Caldwell presented documentation of Hannah's financial situation, modest but stable, with no debts and a productive farm that provided adequately for the family's needs. Henry's lawyer countered with arguments about the hardships of frontier life for children raised by a single mother, the limited opportunities for education and social development on an isolated homestead, and veiled suggestions about Hannah's emotional stability following her husband's death. Through it all, Hannah sat straight-backed and composed, though Wade, seated beside her, could feel the slight trembling of her hand when he occasionally covered it with his own. Finally, Caldwell played their trump card. Your Honor, we have evidence that Mr. Henry Davis's complaint was not motivated by concern for his niece and nephew, but rather by his desire to acquire Mrs. Davis's property for mining purposes. Henry shifted in his seat, a flicker of unease crossing his face for the first time. Caldwell presented Henry's note, reading aloud the damning phrase about strategically motivated complaints. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Henry's lawyer was on his feet instantly. This alleged note cannot be verified as my client's writing. It could easily have been fabricated. I can verify it, Wade said, rising from his seat. I watched Mr. Davis write and sign it yesterday afternoon in his office. Judge Patterson frowned. And who exactly are you, sir? Wade Quinn, Your Honor. I've been assisting Mrs. Davis in this matter. The judge's frown deepened. In what capacity? Before Wade could answer, the courtroom doors opened, and a commotion at the back drew everyone's attention. 2 children broke away from their escort and ran down the center aisle. "Mama!" Emma cried, flinging herself into Hannah's arms. Samuel was close behind, his thin face alight with relief as Hannah gathered both children close, tears streaming down her cheeks. Judge Patterson banged his gavel. Order! Who authorized the children to be brought to this hearing? The distinguished man beside the judge leaned over and spoke quietly to him. The judge's face paled slightly as he listened. It seems, Judge Patterson said stiffly when the man had finished, that the territorial governor has taken a personal interest in this case and ordered the children brought here today. Henry's confident demeanor crumbled visibly. His eyes darted around the room, finally settling on Wade with a look of pure hatred. The governor's representative rose. Your Honor, in light of the evidence presented and the questionable circumstances surrounding the original complaint, Governor Hoyt recommends that custody be immediately restored to Mrs. Davis pending a full investigation into this matter. Judge Patterson looked as if he had swallowed something bitter, but with the governor's representative present, he had little choice. The court finds in favor of the petition. Custody of Samuel and Emma Davis is hereby restored to their mother Hannah Davis, effective immediately. The courtroom erupted in cheers from Hannah's supporters. She sat stunned, her arms still around her children, unable to believe that the ordeal was truly over. Wade leaned close. It's done, he said softly. They're yours again. Hannah looked up at him through tear-filled eyes, a radiant smile transforming her face. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. Henry stormed from the courtroom without looking back, his lawyer hurrying after him. The governor's representative approached Hannah and Wade. Mrs. Davis, he said, bowing slightly. The governor sends his personal apologies for the distress you have endured. There will be a full investigation into the conduct of both Judge Patterson and Mr. Davis. Hannah stood, still holding Emma's hand while Samuel pressed against her side. Please thank the governor for his intervention, sir. I am forever grateful. As they left the courthouse, Hannah's neighbors surrounded them, offering congratulations and support. Samuel and Emma, though clearly overwhelmed by the events, stayed close to their mother, as if afraid they might be separated again. Wade hung back, watching the reunion with a mixture of joy and something that felt strangely like loss. His task was complete. Hannah had her children back. There was nothing to keep him in Cheyenne any longer. As if sensing his thoughts, Hannah turned, her eyes finding his over the heads of the well-wishers. She said something to Mrs. Peterson, who nodded and took the children's hands, then made her way through the crowd to Wade's side. You're thinking of leaving, she said, not a question but a statement. Wade nodded. The cattle drive to Montana. It's probably already started, but I might be able to catch up. Hannah's eyes searched his. Is that what you want? Wade looked away, unable to hold her gaze. What I want and what needs to be done aren't always the same thing. And what is it you think needs to be done? Hannah asked softly. Wade gestured vaguely northward. Moving on. It's what I do. Hannah reached up and placed her hand against his cheek, gently turning his face back toward hers. What if there was a reason to stay? The touch of her hand, the question in her eyes, Wade felt something inside him shift, like the last piece of a puzzle finally falling into place. "Hannah," he began, his voice rougher than usual. "Come home with us," she said simply. "The children already adore you, and I—" She hesitated, a blush rising to her cheeks. "I've grown rather fond of you myself." Wade covered her hand with his own, turning it to press a kiss against her palm. "Are you sure? I'm not exactly a settled man." Hannah smiled. "You spent the past 2 weeks fighting for my children as if they were your own. That seems pretty settled to me." Over her shoulder, Wade could see Samuel and Emma watching them curiously. The boy gave a tentative wave, which Wade returned. "Besides," Hannah added with a mischievous gleam in her eye, "someone needs to help me protect my copper deposits from my scheming brother-in-law." Wade laughed, a genuine laugh that felt foreign but welcome after so many years of solitude. "When you put it that way, how can I refuse?" The journey back to the homestead was filled with the excited chatter of Samuel and Emma, eager to tell their mother every detail of their time at the children's home. Wade rode slightly behind the wagon Hannah drove, watching the family reunited, feeling a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. As they approached the cabin, Samuel turned to him. "Are you staying with us, Mr. Quinn?" Wade glanced at Hannah, who was watching him with a soft smile. "For a while," he answered, returning her smile with one of his own. That night, after the children were tucked into their beds, Wade and Hannah sat on the porch steps, the vast Wyoming night spread above them. Hannah's shoulder rested lightly against Wade's, a simple touch that felt more significant than any words. "What happens now?" Wade asked, his voice low to avoid waking the children through the open cabin window. Hannah's hand found his in the darkness. "Now we take each day as it comes. We rebuild what was almost lost. We make a life." Wade's fingers interlaced with hers. "I haven't had a real home since I was 17, he admitted. Hannah leaned her head against his shoulder. "Then it's about time you found one." In the months that followed, Wade and Hannah's relationship deepened as they worked side by side to strengthen the homestead and heal the children's emotional wounds from their separation. Wade built an addition to the cabin, taught Samuel to ride and fish, and discovered in himself a patience he hadn't known he possessed when helping Emma learn her letters. Henry Davis, facing an investigation into his business practices and the possibility of charges for attempting to corrupt a territorial judge, abruptly sold his mining interests and left Wyoming for parts unknown. Judge Patterson retired shortly thereafter, citing health concerns. As autumn painted the landscape in golds and reds, Wade took Hannah into Cheyenne one crisp Saturday morning, ostensibly to purchase supplies for the coming winter. While there, he surprised her by leading her to Jeremiah Caldwell's office. "What are we doing here?" Hannah asked, puzzled. Wade merely smiled and ushered her inside, where Caldwell was waiting with 2 documents on his desk. "Mrs. Davis," the lawyer greeted her, "Mr. Quinn asked me to prepare these for your consideration." Hannah looked questioningly at Wade, who nodded encouragingly. She picked up the first document, a deed of partnership for the homestead, adding Wade's name alongside hers. "Oh, Wade," she asked, her voice soft with wonder. "I want to build something permanent," he said simply. "With you, if you'll have me." Hannah's eyes filled with tears as she reached for the second document. It was a marriage license, already filled out with their names, lacking only their signatures. "You don't have to answer now," Wade said quickly. "I know it hasn't been that long." Hannah pressed her fingers gently against his lips, silencing him. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain. "My answer is yes." They were married that afternoon by the local minister, with Samuel and Emma as their only witnesses. The children had been prepared for the possibility, having been consulted by Wade days earlier when he asked their permission to marry their mother. That evening, after the children were asleep, Hannah and Wade stood in the doorway of their cabin, his arms wrapped around her from behind as they gazed at the stars. "I never expected to find you," Wade murmured against her hair. I'd given up on the idea of family, of belonging somewhere. Hannah turned in his arms, her face tilted up to his. Sometimes the best things in life are the ones we never saw coming. Wade lowered his head to kiss her, a kiss that held the promise of all the years that stretched before them. 2 years later, on a summer morning much like the one when Wade had first found Hannah kneeling in the dust of her yard, the Davis-Quinn homestead was flourishing. A small copper mining operation on the eastern edge of the property, run as a partnership with a reputable mining company from Denver, provided financial security. The main portion of the land remained dedicated to farming and ranching, with Wade's experienced management increasing its productivity. Hannah stood on the porch, one hand resting on her rounded belly where their first child together grew. She watched as Wade taught Samuel, now 10, how to gentle a young colt in the corral beside the barn. Emma, 8, sat on the fence rail, her legs swinging as she called out advice to her brother. As Wade looked up and caught Hannah's eye across the yard, his face breaking into the smile that was now so familiar and dear to her, Hannah reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The pain of loss, the fight for justice, the unexpected love that had blossomed in the midst of struggle, all had led to this place of profound contentment. Wade excused himself from the corral and walked toward her, his stride purposeful, yet relaxed in a way it hadn't been when she first met him. The restlessness that had driven him for so many years had given way to a settled peace that matched her own. "How are my girls doing?" he asked, one hand coming to rest protectively over hers on her belly. "We're just fine," Hannah assured him, leaning into his embrace. "Although your daughter has been kicking up a storm all morning. I think she might have inherited your restless spirit." Wade chuckled. "Poor child. Let's hope she gets your good sense to balance it out." Hannah turned her face up for his kiss, still marveling at how right it felt to be in his arms, to share this life with him. "I was just thinking about that day you rode up and found me after the children were taken," she said when they parted. "How did you know to stop?" Wade brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I didn't," he admitted. "I was just passing through. But the moment I saw you..." He paused, searching for words. "It was like something inside me recognized you, even though we'd never met. Like my whole life had been leading me to that moment, to you." Hannah smiled, her heart full. "Then I'm very glad you listened to that something inside you." From the corral, Samuel called for Wade to come see his progress with the colt. Emma jumped down from the fence and ran to join her mother on the porch. "Is the baby moving?" she asked eagerly, placing her small hand beside Wade's on Hannah's belly. As if in response, the baby kicked, earning a delighted giggle from Emma. Wade pressed a kiss to Hannah's forehead before returning to Samuel and the colt. Hannah watched him go, her daughter's warm hand still on her belly, the Wyoming sun casting its golden light over the home and family they had fought for and won. In that moment, surrounded by the love that had found her when she least expected it, Hannah knew with absolute certainty that some battles were worth every sacrifice, every tear, every moment of doubt, for they led not just to victory, but to healing, to wholeness, and finally, to home.